Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Test 1 2. All right, we appreciate your patience. I think we have it worked out. Give us a few moments and we can resume Bible study. If you know anyone else that wants to tune in, please contact them and let them know that we're about to resume momentarily. Again, thank you for your patience.
Check. 1 2. That's good. Clear. 1 2. Check. We're going to see if we can try it again. All righty. All righty. We're set. All righty. Well, thank you so much for your patience. And we praise God for, again, for the media team. They pulled together and worked out what was going on. So welcome back. Again, thank you for your patience. If you're just now joining in, welcome to Wednesday Night Bible Study. We have been talking about the Red Sea in Exodus chapter 14. Again, we've described a Red Sea like situation. It is something that, number one, is impossible, something that you cannot handle on your own. Red Sea-like experience is something that is incomparable. You've never gone through anything quite like this before. It is also something that is incomprehensible. You don't understand it. You've been questioning as to why would God allow it to happen, or why would God himself be behind it all? Again, remember, God allows Red Seas to be created, but he also creates Red Seas. And so incomprehensible, you can't understand it, but then lastly, invisible. Couldn't prepare for it, did not see it coming. And so they have made it through this Red Sea. They are on the other side of it now. But perhaps you have not made it through it. Perhaps you're just now facing it. Or maybe you're going through it. Or maybe you're at the end of it. Or again, perhaps you are on the other side. Red Seas, these are situations that you can pray your way through, but you cannot pray your way out. Red Seas, you cannot go around them, you cannot go under them, you cannot go over them, you have to go through them. And as a result of these people going through the Red Sea, they have now composed a song that is in celebration of what God and God alone had brought them through. And so on the first session number 11, I should say, we talked about Exodus chapter 15. Now the first few verses, well, this was actually a song. And as a result of them going through it, they comprise this song about it. And we question ourselves, are we going to sing? Are we going to celebrate? When are we going to sing? Are we going to reject what God is allowing us to go through? Are we going to wrestle with God about it? Or are we going to sing about it? And so tonight we want to move to the second part of this song. And again, they are simply celebrating the fact that they are in God's care. And I want us to know that as well. We are in God's care. I want to raise a statement, and if you want you to listen closely to this statement, and I want you to be able to answer it or respond to it. If you can answer whose and who you are, then you'll never have to worry about where you are or what is happening to you. If you can answer whose and who you are, then you'll never have to worry about where you are or what is happening to you. Now again, to worry is not something we have to do or must do. It is something rather we choose to do. And so the statement there, you don't have to worry, but sometimes, of course, we choose to worry. There's also a message from God, hopefully, that you'll see on the screen in just a moment. And this is this message from God to you. And God simply wants to remind you that everything that you can see, touch, feel, experience, He created it. He did it. He's behind it all. He did it. And it didn't take Him forever to do it. And so God says, listen, I did all of this, and I made it in my image and in my likeness. And if I've been able to do all of this, surely I can take care of you. I'm here for you. You are mine. You belong to me. And I want you to know that. So again, these people, God chose them. God chose you. You belong to Him. And because He chose you and because you belong to Him, He has made plans for your life. Where you are is not an accident. You may not understand where you are, but God has placed you there. You may not even understand what is going on in your life, this particular season of your life, this particular chapter of your life. You may not understand it, but that's okay. God is behind it all. And so there's no need for you to worry. There is no need for you to panic. There's no need for you to fret. You know whose and who you are, and so you don't have to worry about where you are or what is happening to you. And here again, I want us to get to tonight's topic of discussion, and that is we want to celebrate the fact that we are in God's care. And in verses 4 and following, I want to break this down in 3 parts. And here, this song is basically about the incomparability of God or of Yahweh. Yahweh, the covenant-keeping God, the one true living God. And so let's first look at His power in verses 4 through 8. You will notice again in Exodus chapter 14, verse 4 is somewhat of a summary of what has happened. But then you, after reading verses 4 and 5, it begins to, in some way, describe God's power. The writer here, first of all, talks about God's right hand. And here, of course, we know God is spirit, but here Moses is speaking anthropomorphic terms, and that is giving God human-like characteristics or body parts. And so when he talks about your right hand, he is literally talking about, if you can describe a boxer who has a right hand punch that is destructive, that is devastating, you have to watch out for the right hand. If that boxer is being trained, they'll tell him to watch out for that right hand because it is lethal. And so you can trace in Scripture the number of times and the nature of how God used his right hand. And so here he's talking about God did this not with his hands, but with a hand, his right hand. He says here, your right hand, O Lord, glorious in power. He says it again, your right hand, O Lord, shattered the enemy. And now he goes on and talking about God's power, his power. He first says the greatness of God's majesty. You know, majesty, it speaks of an imposing quality. There are some people who move with grace, who move with dignity. They move with royalty. You have to pay attention to them. You cannot ignore them because there's a certain quality about their presence. And so here, Moses is saying that there is something, God, about the very presence of your hand. It's imposing. You cannot deny it. You cannot ignore it. But then he moves on to say, you sent out your fury. Your fury. It's like a consuming fire. He says here, it consumed them like stubble or like straw. And stubble and straw is flammable. It is easily set afire. And so God easily handled the enemy. But then he goes on and he says, and here he's talking about again God's power. He mentions the very nostrils, at the blast of your nostrils. And of course we understand the nostrils as that external, or those external holes or opening of the nose. I know right now my kids are probably laughing because they say I have a big nose. But anyway, the imagery here is the fact that the nostrils, it's a small hole. It's a small opening at the end of the nose. And so in essence, something as small as a nostril, God breathed from his nostrils. And listen to what happens. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The floods stood up in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. Now notice this is something as simple, as easy as God literally breathing out. And so God never has to do all that God has to do, because whatever God does is enough. He is all powerful. And just the exhale, just the breathing out of the nostrils, and look at the evidence of it. And so here we can surmise that to be in God's care, it suggests that God will fight for his namesake. God is doing this not because the people have been obedient, not because the people are kind, not because the people are trustworthy, but God has deemed them as his own. God has selected them. God has chose them to be his own. And so this statement of summation, listen, God fights for his namesake. Isn't that liberating to know that you and I do not have to fight or fend for ourselves, but we have someone who fights our battles, and so all we have to do is live for him, is to represent him, is to serve him. So first of all, the passage, this song, it celebrates the fact that you're in God's care. And his power, No other power is like his power. Talks about his hand, talks about the majesty, talks about his fury, his nostrils, and whatnot. But then Moses here, and again, these people have comprised the song. They then begin to talk about God's provision. And here, this is what it means to be in God's care. And I want us to notice three features in verses 9 and 10, and even we can pick up one that's a part of this, but it's in verse number 12. I want us to listen to what the enemy said and how they said it. I want us to also look at what happened to the enemy. Notice what it says in verse number 9. And the enemy is speaking arrogantly. The enemy said, look at the number of eyes. Look at the number of I wills. I will pursue. The enemy says, I will pursue, meaning Pharaoh, his army. I will overtake. I will drive the spoil. I will divide the spoil, My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword. My hand shall destroy them. Notice all of these I wills. But then notice in verse number 10, you hear what the enemy has said and how it was spoken, but then it says that the enemy sank immediately. They sank easily. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. And how did this happen? Look what it says. You blew with your wind. Again, remember God's power from out of his nostrils, but look at what God uses, what belongs to him. This, again, speaks of God's provisionary care. God is not limited to what he can use. God is not, bound by what he can use. God doesn't have to check facts and figures to see if he can afford to use anything or do anything. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. He has creative rights. He has copyrights. Everything we can see belongs to him. Everything we cannot see belongs to him. Everything above ground, within the earth, beneath the earth, outer space, it all belongs to him. And so God uses what belongs to him. He uses his wind, and look at what God does to the enemy. They sank. They sank like you drop a 50-pound bag of potatoes in a swimming pool. They sank, and God simply did that with an exhale, a breathing out, a breathing from his nostrils, and it happened immediately. So remember how they spoke. They spoke arrogantly. They talked about what they were going to do. And of course, here in our time, we all have, there are different situations where people will try to come against you. They try to speak as if, it's not going to work out for you. It's not going to be successful. They speak against you, but God has the last say so. And immediately, again, the enemy sank. But then that's not all what happened to them. The enemy was also swallowed. If you look at verse number 12, you stretched out, there it is again, your right hand, the earth swallowed them. This happened easily. It is literally like taking a gulp. It is literally like gulping down a spoonful of oatmeal. That's how easily they were consumed. That's how easily God handled them. And notice what God used. God used what he created. He used the wind, he used the sea, etc., because it all belongs to him. So this statement of summation, as it relates to the lyrics of this song and what they witness God doing for them, they understand that creation is his. And so here again, for the child of God, knowing whose and who you are, again, it delivers us from having to worry about where we are, what is going on, why it is happening. No, God, because we are in his care, we don't have to worry about those things. We don't have to worry about those matters because creation is his. God confirms this over and over again. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. He says the cattle on 10,000 hill belongs to mine. He said, if I was hungry, I wouldn't even tell you. God is all sufficient. And because you belong to him, it is his responsibility to care for you. It is your responsibility to live for him. When you are serious about his business, he will handle your business. Seek first the kingdom of heaven and what is right according to God. And all these things, he says, Jesus says, will be added unto you. Well, that's two parts of this song. I want to pause and see if we have any questions. I know we had technical difficulty earlier, and so we'll come back, give you a chance to shoot us questions. But here again now, this song, and it is a song, and the lyrics are from how God brought them through that Red Sea and how God demonstrated himself to these people. And so it gives us a sense that God is all powerful. It talks about his right hand. It talks about his majesty. It talks about his fury. It talks about even his nostrils. But then it also talks about his provisionary care, that everything is at his disposal. God can use everything without permission. He uses it because he owns it. But then this last part, verses, you can look at verse number 11, and it basically is talking about God's personhood. This speaks of who God is. And of course, we have to understand that they were part of what is called a polytheistic culture. Poly meaning many, several, theistic for theo or God. There were many gods in their era, in their time, and there were many gods even in their lives. And so notice what the passage says again in verse number 11. So no one is like God in terms of his power. No one can do what God can do. No one is like God in terms of his provisionary care. No one has at their disposal as God. Everything belongs to him. But then now there is no other God like God. That is to say, God, the scriptures never tell us, and even today, that there are no other gods. Yeah, but they just tell us there's no other God like God. Today, we have our own little gods. We will always have gods because we create them in our image and in our likeness. But God says, there is no other God like me. That is to say, no God fits the description. No God qualifies. No God is like me. No God can do what I can do. No God can compete with me. No God can be victorious over me. No God is worthy to be my peer. God is God, and God alone is God. So here the question is, who is like you, O Lord, Yahweh, among the gods? That is to say, again, it doesn't say there are no other gods. It just says that there's no God like God, the one true living God. And here, this is why it's so important that we know whose and who we are. We must know this so that we will know that we are serving the only God, the one true living God, the only God that matters. And so here, the writer here, he helps us in understanding somewhat of the personhood of God. We do not have a way off, long distant relationship only type of God. God is relational. God is personal. God is not out there. God is not up there. God is in here. He is with us. He never leaves us. He never forsakes us. And so here, to help us with the personhood of God, only God is named. Okay? Other gods are named by people. Get that. The people name the God. The people create the God. The people make the God. The people tell the God what that God desires. If it's the rain God, if it's the, the agricultural, if it's, animal. I mean, the people give definition to the God instead of the God defining the people. And again, people do this all the time. We create gods in our likings and our image and according to our desires. But only Yahweh is named. Here again, who is like you, O Yahweh, O Lord, among the gods? And so now he helps us somewhat with there's no comparison with God's personhood. He gives us two examples. He says, number one, who is like you, that is majestic in holiness. Remember that word majestic, imposing quality. Okay? And so now to combine majestic in holiness, in essence, what they are saying in this song is that God's presence is his presence, is unlike his presence, is apart from anything that has been created. Again, other gods are created for something, like something, as something. But the one true living God, he creates everything that was created in his image and in his likeness, and he never has to repeat it in the exact same way. He is majestic in his holiness, in that he is apart from, there is nothing equal to him, there is nothing like him, there is no peer to him. He has an imposing quality. The very presence of God cannot be denied. And so he is majestic in holiness. You see, the people had to be convinced that God was God. And one way God convinced the people that he was God is by what he did to Pharaoh and Pharaoh's gods. And God is still convincing us that he is God. And he convinces us that he is God by destroying our gods. Okay? So he is majestic in holiness. They celebrate that. But then, number two, it talks about he is awesome in splendor. The word, if you look up the word awesome, you'll find a definition that says something like inspiring awe. So then you've got to break it down to see, okay, what do you mean inspiring awe? So you look at the word awe, and then it gives us a sense of what the people are actually singing about as it relates to God. And so awe is an emotion of mingled reverence, dread, and wonder inspired by something majestic or imposing. I'll say that one more time. Awe is an emotion of mingled reverence, dread, and wonder inspired by something majestic or imposing. And so here the writer says, God, he is awesome in what? Splendor. And splendor is brightness, or it means to shine. And so here it is speaking of there is no way you cannot see God because he is awesome. His presence is so alarming. His presence is so large that you cannot help but notice there has to be a God. And here God would continue to make himself known, sometimes in awful ways. It speaks of the terror of God. God is nothing to play with. God is nothing to hint at. God has an awful presence. God can be an awful terror in that he can destroy and defeat all foes. Okay, and so here again, that is that part of worship. That is that part. Worship is not like going to a pep rally in a gym. No, worship is not a pep rally. Worship is to in some way sense the very holy presence of God. You know he is in the room. You want to get close, but you realize you can't get too close. His presence is heavy. His presence is thick. And so there are times when we can only handle so much of his presence because his presence is draining. It consumes us of our strength, of our energy. That's why sometimes when we've been engaged by his presence, we have to get somewhere, sit down, and go to sleep. Because that speaks of the awful presence of God. But here they speak about he is awesome in splendor. And so here again, it helps us to know that there's no one like Yahweh. Here again, who is like you, O Yahweh, among the gods? Again, it does not indicate that there are no other gods. There will always be gods because there will always be people who create gods. And so he's literally saying that there are no parallels to Yahweh. All right, we're going to pull up just for a moment and see if we have any questions about what it means to be in the care of God. Okay? Okay, the question was, are we creating our own gods when we say or make statements like God is going to get them, God is going to take care of them for us? Not necessarily so. Now, the Bible gives us any number of examples of how God had to remind kings, he had to remind nations, he had to remind a people that their enemies were his enemy and that he would take care of the enemies and that they should not take matters into their own hands, but he will deal with anything and anyone that opposes him. And so we don't have to sick God on anyone. We don't have to send God anywhere. We don't have to even tell people, my God is going to get. No, we don't have to do any of those things. We are to take a stand for righteousness. We are to live for God. And we are to dress. We are to prepare for warfare that takes place in our lives. And we leave the actual handling and defeating of enemies. We leave all of that up to God. Okay? So we don't have a God that we can get people we don't like or who don't like us. Okay? How do we avoid creating our own gods subconsciously is the question. Here again, one of the ways you can really get a sense of how important God is you can take a look at what do you do with most of your time, talent, and treasure. Where are your greatest commitments? What are you most committed to? What do you give most of your time? What do you give most of your talent? What do you give most of your treasure? How do you rank things, people, circumstances on a list? Do you have a list, again, of what's most important to you? You know, is it job, family, God? Is it family, God, career? Again, you can rank things, for lack of a better word, on a list to see how important are they to you. And so what is most important to us, we give most of our time, talent, and treasure. And so if God is my God, if God is my one true living God, then God gets most of my time, talent, and treasure. And God is the list. We don't have God on a list. God is the list. Nothing else comes close to God. It's kind of like Jesus saying, we only love God, and he talks about, if you don't hate mother, sister, brother, then you cannot follow me. You cannot be my disciples. In essence, what he's saying, our love for God, our love for our spouses, our love for our kids, our love for siblings, looks like hate in comparison to our love for God. It's not even close, is what he's saying. Our commitments, he's talking about our priorities, again, it's not even close is what he is saying there. So take a look at what we do with most of our time, talent, and treasure. What does it go towards? Does it go towards glorifying God? Does it go towards making God known and seen? Even on our jobs, we perform in such a way that God is glorified. And when people ask us about our work ethic, ask us about our commitment, ask us about our excellence in working, we tell them because we understand we are on assignment for God and we want to represent him in every conceivable way. So even then, God is first. Okay? So we take a look at what do we do with most of our time, talent, and treasure. That gives us a sense of where is God in terms of importance, significance, and priority. Another question. All right? It says the people sang. That's what it says. It does not say some. It does not say most. It says the people sang. Then the people sang. So it is safe for us to believe that they participated in that celebration because they witnessed it. They were part of it. And so here again is, in any given setting, people have experienced their own Red Sea-like deliverance or experience. So all people should participate in celebrating or singing to a God who has been behind their making it through these types of situations. Again, this is a song not about God. This is a song to God. Other question? Okay. Is this a reason why, and when you talk about worship and when you talk about coming into the awesome presence of God, his majestic, he is the majestic and holiness and all that. Is this one of the reasons why sometimes people cry uncontrollably? That can be, yes. Here again, people, there are any number of ways where reverence, humility, manifests itself in some physical way. There are some people who can shed tears uncontrollably. There are some people who rejoice with hands. There are some people who sit in abject silence because of they are in awe, and there are some people who literally hold themselves. There are some people who rock. There are some people who grunt, who moan. Again, it can manifest itself in so many different ways. So that could be a reason why some people will express being in the imposing presence of God. Yes. Okay. Do we have any other questions about the song? Okay. Now here again, if you can answer whose and who you are, you'll never have to worry about where you are and what is happening to you. We choose to worry. We do not have to worry. We belong to God. God has chosen us as his people. And so God has power to take care of us. God has provisions such that we don't ever have to think that God is going to provide for others and he is going to neglect or skip over us, his provisional care. Everything that he has made, he can use freely. And then, of course, he is personable. He is our personal God. And that he and he alone deserves our ultimate commitment. He deserves our worship. He deserves all of that because no one measures up to the standard. No one fulfills the requirements. No one is qualified to be a God the way God is, because he destroys all other gods. All right? So, any more questions? Here again, some scholars suggest the right hand speaks of the place of human need, the right hand, the right side. Jesus is at the right hand of the Father. What is he doing? He is making intercession. He is interceding for us. He is speaking to God on our behalf, in our behalf. And so some scholars suggest that it is the place of need. And so God uses his right hand to meet the needs or to take care of the needs of his people, whether it is for battle or for fight, for warfare. Again, it speaks of the place of need. Okay? All righty. Got any more questions? Okay. Now, remember, there's nobody like God. No God has his power like God. No God is powerful. No God has the resources, the provision. No God is as intimate. No God is as personable as God. God is the only true living God. So I want us to celebrate what it means to be in his care and under his care. Have a great rest of the evening. Thank you so much for being patient with us. We apologize for the technical difficulties, but praise God for the team who were able to reassemble and to work it out, and so we were able to get the study in. Again, be safe, be smart, be sensible, be prayerful, and look forward to us praying together tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. Take care. God bless. Have a great evening.